Welcome gamers to what is likely to be a fairly involved video. This is the history of Slitherine Games, 25 incredible years, and I've pretty much been with it almost from the start, to be honest, even like the games, but also in the forum. I've been in the forum for 20 odd years, 19, 20 years, something, and so a long time. So what I've done is I've actually, from what I can do, I've actually been able to I've tried to put as many of the games into like a timeline, which you can sort of see down through here, where I've got this Slitherine formed on the 4th of July in the year 2000. The logo hasn't changed much, actually. It's sort of funny. In the early days, it of course, was like 8-bit logos and things like that, but it's sort of moved on since then. So the timeline that I've got is I sort of start to move through. I've color-coded the various games. If they're orange, it means that Slitherine developed the games. If it is purple, as we sort of see a few of the ones in through here, these would be matrix games where there was like a bit of a collaboration there, but mainly sort of Matrix, and then taken over, or Slitherine sort of then took over the management of them. But we'll go through in depth, and then the vast majority after this you'll sort of see will be mainly sort of blue. And the blue is where Slitherine then becomes the publisher of the game. So we'll sort of have a look at the history as it sort of tracks on through. You can see there, green is also like just important dates in the company's history. Like, for example, you can see there in 2010 in May, they merged with Matrix Games. And so that was sort of like where a lot of, from that point forward, we don't see any more purples at that stage. We just continue on through. I have a couple of other ones as well. There's a few greys in through here, for example. Combat Mission, Battle for Normandy. These are games that Slitherine came in late to be the publisher. So sort of took over, in this case, Battlefront was the one that was actually publishing and developing the Combat Mission games. And then fairly late in the piece, I think 2022, 2023, somewhere in there, that Slitherine actually then became essentially the publisher of the game at that point. So when we got sort of the more late ones of those sort of style, I'll then sort of be changing them back to blue. So that's what the color coding is. So as you're watching these, some of these go, to some sort of depth into the timeline that I've actually got through here. So it's a lot bigger, a lot more games than I even realised when I started. Like, it just goes on and on and on and on, and there's heaps of them. Like, they just go on and on. It's really, really quite amazing. Like, just all the way through, right up to right now. Like, here we are. So with Broken Arrow just coming out. So that's where we are now. So it's a very, very involved timeline. So I'm going to go through it. I'm going to be skipping over bits and pieces, I think, just as I sort of get there. Now, what I'll also try to do as I do this is to, I guess, give some of my own little insights into the games, the histories that I do know about with some of the games as well. So I will be deviating off a little bit. So even though I'll be skipping over games that I don't really know all that well, I will try to sort of talk about the games that I do know, and the history of even behind the scenes type information that I do know about some of the games. There's some fairly interesting histories with some of these, some of the big titles that Slitherine has actually controlled over the years. Like, it's actually it's been quite good fun actually going through and actually doing the research. It's taken a bit of time to actually sort of put it all together, but certainly from my own anecdotes, just from being a streamer and a game player, essentially. I mean, I wasn't streaming, of course, way back here. I don't even think that YouTube was around at this point in time. I was going to put like real-time events in as well, just like as in real-world events around it. But I thought, no, it's so much in here to get through anyway. So I'll be talking about that. I'll also be talking about one of my greatest disappointments in my gaming lifetime. It's there's one of their games I was really, really looking forward to, and it never actually, well, it sort of eventuated, but they've now taken it off the shelves. So when we get to that one, I will talk about that one as well a little bit. So we'll have the good and some of the bad. There's been very little bad, actually. It's sort of funny looking through them, though. So it's towards, about 3/4 of the way through the list, I'm thinking, they've had very little sort of failures. Like there's a few games that I didn't really like, a few, but it's like a handful. The vast majority I've thoroughly enjoyed. And we're talking 150 odd games. And one thing I did also with this list is I took out all of the DLCs. So I'm not going to be showing DLCs. These are just base games. In some instances, like for example in Pike and Shot, when we get to that one, I'll explain what these are at the time. Pike and Shot came out a year or so before the one that I've actually got listed in here, and it's actually an important date. So like as in the original one is actually probably more important than the one that I've ended up with, but I've gone with the complete version because that's the current version of the game. They then sort of with all the add-ons, they then sort of made it into one big game, and so the original game is not here. But I'm thinking from a timeline. I'll still talk about it anyway when we get to that particular point in time as to why that was important. So I'll try to sort of put these little anecdotes together as we go through. Anyway, I don't want to rabbit on for too long in this phase. I think we'll just get into sort of going through the timeline and the various games, talking very briefly about most games and sort of going in depth with a few of them. So we'll sort of wind forward. The game was formed essentially in the year 2000 by Ian McNeil and two friends. Ian is still actually heavily involved in the games, and so he's sort of been a stalwart throughout the whole process. We then moved forward with developing the games, and their first game actually came out, Legion, in 2002 on the 3rd of June 2002, and I did buy this game. I don't know when I bought it, but it was certainly near the start. Would have been maybe within 6 months of that, I think. So this is Legion that we sort of see through here. I love this game. It's almost, you could almost think of it as a bit of a precursor to a lot of the Total War games to a degree, the way it sort of did work. I've always wondered why there was never sort of like a late remake of the game, because I at the time, this was just as a fun little anecdote, this was actually my main procrastination game for probably a year, really. I just couldn't stop playing it, and instead of working, I would just basically play Legion, or one of the derivatives you can see through there, Legion Gold, even Chariots of War. I didn't particularly like that one, to be honest, but these were sort of like the early games that Slitherine then sort of put out, and you can see there's a bit of a distance between, about a year between Legion then Legion Gold. Spartan then sort of took it across into the Peloponnese, into Greece. And then, after Spartan, we then ended up the gates of Troy. And then finally, it's sort of this series of, this is now a fair few years. So we're sort of like 5 years into the actual development of the company. And we then get Legion Arena, which is essentially the last of these Legion-style games. So they sort of were the early process of where sort of Slitherine was. I know that around this time they started to get heavily involved in tabletop warfare and things like this as well. I mean, it sort of makes sense, given the style of games that they were then sort of creating. They were also started to make other inroads into other areas as well, like talking with BBC, for example, and the History Channel. And so they started to develop some of those. So we'll have a look at those as they sort of start to come forward. Just wind the timeline forward a little bit, so we now start to see a few of the interesting games that really have been sort of like stalwarts for the wargaming community. But these were mainly Matrix games back at this point in time. They're now sort of like Slitherine is now the main publishing arm of these. But the Gary Grigsby's World at War, for example, we'll talk about more when they sort of do come through. Close Combat, Modern Tactics back in through this other side as well. Then we actually have Commander Napoleon at War. Then we actually again end up with the connection with Close Combat. I won't spend too much time with the close combat games, although there is some that do come towards the back end where Slitherine then goes back into their, put on their development hat and sort of actually develop some years later, actually, which is interesting. But they did sort of start to become very closely aligned with Matrix, with the actual publishing of them. Before then, and it's worth maybe at some point doing a history of the Close Combat franchise, because that's also got a rich history. A lot of the games that end up across Slitherine's desk really are quite interesting, like in terms of their overall history, and certainly Close Combat is one of those games where the development went through a fair few different companies, the publishing went through a fair few different companies, and sort of essentially winded up at Slitherine with the games as well. So we've got sort of like various Close Combat games. You can see that Close Combat: The Longest Day, for example, in 2009. So we're sort of now rocketing forward. We're sort of now getting close to 10 years in. We don't have a real lot behind us at this point in time, but things really do compress now in the coming decade. One game I will actually deviate off with a little bit here is Conquest Medieval Realms, which came out in 2009. I actually loved this game, but I actually loved the precursor to it, which is a game called Slay. And so this is sort of like a bit more of a a bit more of a more graphical version of Slay. Slay was sort of like just a small little, almost like a minefields type game, like from Windows. But it was again one of my little go-to games over the years, and so when Conquest Medieval Realms came out, it was sort of like for me a natural buy to sort of make sure that I grabbed that game. So I did really quite enjoy that one a lot, actually. It's sort of one of those things where you probably it's a game that it's a simple game, simple mechanics, but again it's very, very quick and very enjoyable. Again, that was one of my, when I think back on these sort of games, it was, for a time this was one of my favourite Slitherine games. In fact, I think it was pretty more Matrix than Slitherine at that stage. But anyway, they still ended up all in the same spot. So we sort of move along this timeline, we'll sort of see that we've now got a few things, for example, like history, the great empires of like with Rome, and we've got horrible histories, ruthless Romans. And this is actually a time in Slytherine's development where they were now starting to connect with other entities, for example, like the BBC or the History Channel. There was other publishers and things, I think, as well involved. They certainly with horrible histories, that became something that was also board games, TV series, things like that Slytherin weren't really involved in that side, I don't think. But certainly in terms of the gaming side, they were the company that was sort of putting a lot of that early work together. And this, I think, then sort of allowed them to form relationships outside of just the purely wargaming and gaming industries, which has sort of allowed them to, I think, part of their success is that they really have been able to extend out, from just being a niche gamer or a niche gaming company into very sort of into other fields, including the military circles now sort of doing simulation war games for actual for NATO countries and things, which is just absolutely awesome. It's incredible the growth that they've actually had over that period of time. Anyway, I didn't ever play those games, so I can't really comment on whether they were good or bad. I don't really know. But now we go to one of the games that I really enjoyed an awful lot, which is, of course, Field of Glory. Now, the original Field of Glory, the game, with all of the different DLCs that then came with it as well, very, very closely followed the development of the tabletop game in terms of what they brought out. So if there was a tabletop expansion, for example, like I think it was Field of Arrows or something like that, I think that was the one. I think it was whichever one was the one. By the time they took it into the medieval era, that was my favourite one. I think it was Field of Arrows. Maybe I may be wrong about that. Anyway, it's a lot of those. The development goes from the ancient times all the way through to the medieval times, and beyond that, ultimately, which we'll talk about in just a minute. And so, the development of the Field of Glory franchise within Slytherin was something where they were helping a lot with the tabletop. The forum was the go-to for the tabletop people, as well as for the actual computer game that then came out in 2009. So we end up with a situation where they've really got this franchise now that they can sort of that they can control or help to sort of push along. And so there was a lot of DLCs that came out. These were quite expensive, I've got to say, at the time, because I remember I used to try to find an excuse to then go and get the next DLC when it did come out, but they were very, very expensive. The interesting thing with this is if you have played the more modern versions of Field of Glory, there are a lot of differences between this and this older version. For example, the hoplites that we sort of see in through here, from what I can remember, I think there were hoplites that ended up taking like 2 areas, and it was very hard to manoeuvre them around so they would take up 2 hexes, and you'd have to move them. It was quite an involved process. So if you're playing with Greek hoplites, and I chose this screenshot simply because it does actually talk about the hoplites in through here, but I can't remember if it's 2, 4, 6. Now, there's one that's not on its own there, which is not part of the actual group. That doesn't look quite right to me. I always thought that these were in 2s. I may have that wrong, but I do remember that there was a connection where they would link in essentially as one big formation, and it was very hard to break through them, but it was very easy to get around the sides of them and then destroy them. So it was sort of an interesting game. The AI wasn't fantastic into this early phase of the game, but it was still very, very enjoyable. This was actually my go-to game when I actually had the flu or something like that, where I had like a day of nothing to do, where I could just play something, on my laptop. So yeah, this was a game that I did enjoy for a long period of time. And we'll talk about when we get into the like it took a long time after the last one of the releases here before they then went across and developed the new version of the game. And so, and I was hammering Slitherine a lot with, you got to bring out a new version, or, you got to do this, you got to do that. Because I just thought they'd just keep on sort of bringing it along. But anyway, we'll get to that in the history. But it's certainly, I'm very, very happy where it all ends up. It's certainly well beyond me just getting a few extra DLCs, which is sort of all I wanted back at that particular time period. So we'll just wind it forward a little bit more and we'll just have a bit of a look. So this is, of course, very soon afterwards, we end up in 2010, where Matrix and Slitherine merge, and been a marriage made in heaven ever since that time. It's been fantastic, actually, just as a gamer. I was loving all the Matrix games as well at that period of time. So when they got together, it was like, oh wow, this is actually really, really cool. I was worried that, because it is such a niche area with the wargaming, that maybe it was going to be a little bit of a monopoly where they wouldn't have to sort of compete against each other. But they're really working with each other. When you look back at just how much involvement they had with each other from the very, very early days, there was a lot of crossover. So that's worked incredibly well. Like, as a gamer, I'm very, very happy with that merge. Gives us some incredible games over the years. We then got things like the History Channel programs, more close combat that we sort of see in through the side as well. Now the big one as well, which actually a lot of people absolutely loved when it came out, and I think people would again love to see something else done with this particular franchise, which of course is Battlefield Academy. I'll just scroll down a bit because we now sort of we lose it in the timeline down below. There's a few other little things that you sort of see through here as well, which we'll talk about a bit about coming up as well. So Battlefield Academy, what a great game. This was one of the very, very early entry level war games where you could sort of learn basic wargaming with this sort of game, which was fantastic. It was so well done. The actual game itself, no random maps from what I can remember, but it was still a fun game to play through the sort of little puzzle maps that they sort of did have. It was very intuitive to play as well. There weren't any sort of really sort of strange rules, but there was enough complexity to make it fun, but it was also enough simplicity to sort of make it very easy to pick up. And so that was, of course, a great game, and I would love to see this sort of redone again at some point. Again, maybe you get a bit nostalgic about these sort of games, where you sort of think, oh, this was such a cool game, back in the day. But anyway, I certainly enjoyed Battlefield Academy an awful lot. There were other games that sort of spun off a little bit from this one, but not a hell of a lot. They didn't really. I thought they could have developed more than what they ended up sort of doing with that one. So we'll move on. Now, also in 2010, we sort of get the first real connection between Slitherine and really what is an incredible franchise of games from a developer called VR Games, VR Designs, one of the two. I can't remember what his website is called. Anyway, he is the developer. You may know him now as a developer of Shadow Empire. And he was heavily involved with Matrix games back in the early days. Advanced Tactics was released, through Matrix originally. So you got Advanced Tactics Gold. Then once it sort of Advanced Tactics was sort of in the pipeline, we then ended up getting the Decisive Campaign series of games as well, which ended up, because of the connection now with Matrix and Slitherine, ended up sort of become part of what Slitherine would then sort of publish as well. So sort of by osmosis, VR Designs or VR Games, again I can't remember which, sorry about that, but they end up becoming they essentially sort of end up working in this circle of games. And again, just it's been years and years and years that this connection has been there. Look, just double check because I keep on saying it. So VR Designs, it's VR Designs, not VR Games. So VR Designs had originally started off with a game called People's Tactics, which was actually an open source free game, which really was sort of where a lot of the development of everything, including Shadow Empire, started back there, and you can see the roots of it. And then, of course, Decisive Campaigns. Funny story, I loved Advanced Tactics, absolutely loved it. One of my favourite games. Usually when I would sort of get a new laptop or something, if I was going to be travelling, there's a few games I would load on it, and Advanced Tactics was one of the very, very first ones that I'd actually load on on. And I loved it because it had random maps. And so when the Decisive Campaigns games came along, I passed on them for literally years and years, much to my detriment, I've got to say, because what actually happened was it wasn't until I started playing Shadow Empire that I went back and had a look at Decisive Campaigns and just realised what a work of art these games actually are. These are incredible. I kick myself for not actually having gotten involved in looking at them in those early days, because they're just beautiful what they've actually done. And so what we end up with is, in Shadow Empire, we end up with a hybrid between the randomization of advanced tactics and the structure around Decisive Campaigns. And it just works. And so, you can see the progression through these games, which I find fascinating to sort of see I guess where we end up with like Shadow Empire is, one of the, in my opinion, one of the best games ever made. Just where it's, incredible randomization, but incredible structure in the way the game is played. And you can see you can't just start off by building one of those. You've got to go through People's Tactics, Advanced Tactics Gold, Decisive Campaigns. Then you can sort of develop something like that. And so seeing the development of that for me is, and again, I'm kicking myself that I didn't actually play Decisive Campaigns. Like Vic from VR Designs actually contacted me when he started to develop it, thinking, oh, you're probably going to like this. And I'm thinking, without random maps, probably not. I still remember actually thinking, look, I don't know, I'm pretty busy. And, it didn't strike me as something I'd enjoy because of the lack of random maps. And God, I really wish I had have actually played them in the early days. So I sort of kicked myself over that. I've got a few little regrets about games, and that was one of them. And then at the back end of 2010, we end up with the game that makes me shudder still. It's the Gary Grigsby's War in the East. And of course, there's been War in the Pacific and War in the East too. Now, I have tried a couple of these games. I've actually played a little bit of War in the East too. Incredible game. But again, it's one of these games that is it's just so niche in terms of war gaming. The scale and scope of these games is just phenomenal. Like, it's just massive, but it's too big, unfortunately, really to sort of do like justice to it as a video. So I've sort of always passed on these Gary Grigsby's games, even though I've actually had a lot of interest in actually looking at them. I remember trying War in the Pacific and spending, I think, a day without even playing the first turn. And that's what sort of made me think, I can't record this because there's just too much to do. And so it was interesting, very, very interesting, the amount of research that goes on. I think that, like, in my estimation, these Gary Grigsby's War in the sort of series of games is the most in-depth war game that I've ever seen. Like, it's sort of, if you're a history nut, in a portion, of the game, either Pacific or the Eastern Front, it's unbelievable, just the amount of depth that they've actually put into this particular game. Even the little sub rules around doing everything. There's a lot of work that's gone into this particular game, and so too big for me to be able to sort of live stream. It's or to record. Game that I did have interest in, but I knew it was dangerous for me to actually have a good look at it. So I've sort of steered away from it. Having said that, having played more recently War in the East too, I can see that there are smaller scenarios that you can sort of get your teeth into and play them. They're still extremely complex, but they are approachable. So yes, so even though they're absolute monsters, there is actually, like, if you play the full campaign, there are smaller scenarios within the game itself. Okay, now we start to extend into 2011. This is another, mainly Matrix games. These were the series, really, Strategic Command, where they brought out a whole lot of different sorts of games. It's quite interesting, actually, the changes within this franchise over the years. But of course, now Slitherine starts to sort of get more involved in the Strategic Command franchise. The next one that we have is Combat Command, the Battle for Normandy. And in this one, of course, we've then got the start of this incredible franchise of games with the Battlefront had developed. Now, you can see that this one's in grey because at this stage, Slitherine weren't involved in the marketing. It's many, many years later. Now, One thing I get, like whenever I look at these games or play these games, is why would I want to play a game that's 14 years old or whatever it might be? It's like it's a comment that I often get about these games. Just be aware that the actual engine is actually the thing that sort of is the most important thing around all of these combat mission games, and they keep on being updated into the various games, and so. We're up to engine 4, I think, at this stage within the combat mission games, which modernises a lot of what actually happens with the game. It's still got the same interface from back in this era, and like all of the combat mission games sort of do. But the modelling and the bullets actually do have a dip when you actually fire them. Every bullet is modelled. The damage is incredibly accurate. The way it sort of is modelled actually on the units. So it's an amazing game. And so this is Battle for Normandy. I loved this when it first came out, even though it wasn't a Slitherine game at the time. But it ends up in the Slitherine stable. So I thought I'd just mention it. This is actually the era it's from. The reason I wanted to put it back in here is because, yes, it is an oldish game from when it was first developed, but it has continued its development right up until present day, and has been improved and improved and improved over that time period as well. So, don't be put off by the era that it's from. These games are amazing games, and this I think that they've actually got a series of the combat mission games that they even use for NATO, specially made combat mission games for helping NATO officers sort of learn morale and things like that, and how to sort of manage troops and stuff, which is actually really, really cool. Like when you sort of think about it. So I think it's this series of games that actually was in that category. Next game we've got, actually, again, within 2011, is Pride of Nations by Agiod. Agiod and Slitherine have had a very, very long history together, and there's been an incredible amount of games. I've got a feeling that I've actually missed some of the games in my timeline. I've actually went through and, like as I said, I got about 140 in the timeline, and I know I missed one or two because I've been going back and sort of trying to find where they actually are. But I think I've got all the Agiod games. But anyway, Agiod is a developer that probably of all the developers that I've ever come across really looks at the mechanics of what's going on in history, and then finds a game mechanic that will sort of help to then make that one make sense in a gaming sense. And I really appreciate the effort that they go to do this. And so there's a lot of research done, a lot of sort of application done. And of course, Agiod then goes through, there's a whole series of different games that Agiod gets involved in with Slitherine. And we end up with the incredible Field of Glory Empires, and then Field of Glory Kingdoms, which is the current, Field of Glory Kingdoms is the current game that Agiod has been working on for Slitherine. So we sort of end up in that sort of area. But I did want to mention Agiod in particular, just because I've always enjoyed sort of working in and around them with what they do, and I always appreciate just the thinking that goes into the mechanics of inside their games. But again, great series of games. I didn't play much Pride of Nations, to be honest. Certainly played a lot of Field of Glory Empires and Field of Glory Kingdoms, and I'm certainly aware of what Agiod could do. Not easy games that they sort of make, to be fair. Like the games aren't, you wouldn't call them entry level by any stretch, but they do model things very, very well. If we scroll down a little bit, we then sort of see that, again, in July of 2011, we have Panzer Corps Wehrmacht. This is actually the first of the Panzer Corps games that sort of came out. And this is essentially a remake of Panzer General, back from, I think, the 1990s, is when Panzer General came out. But Panzer Corps, when it first started, the first series of Panzer Corps, and there's a lot of additions that were then put into the game because it became very, very popular. This is very much an entry-level war game as well. But they've now brought out, in recent times, Panzer Corps 2. And the big difference between the original Panzer Corps and Panzer Corps 2 is that they've actually now allowed random maps, and also they've allowed the AI to start to sort of think things through. Back in these previous games, the AI was mainly triggered to do things, so it was scripted as you hit certain areas on the map. So you could sort of cheese your way through. It was almost like a puzzle game back then. They still have that component with some of what they do now, but now that with having random maps and things, it now means that they can't just have fully scripted battles. Now I know that there's people who think, oh, I prefer that. I prefer to actually have all of the things scripted, and so I get a much better gameplay. That's fine if you do like that. They have that as well, even in Panzer Corps 2. But the AI can now sort of think things through a little bit. I personally always prefer to have procedural generation. Again, that's the reason I didn't play decisive campaigns, and again, much to my regret. That was one of my big regrets with in gaming, is that I didn't actually play that series of games early enough. But in this case, we've got the Panzer Corps essentially was fully scripted initially, and Panzer Corps 2 then actually brought the AI in. And I know that that's very difficult to add into those sorts of games, so I really appreciate that they actually put the effort into building Panzer Corps 2, which I think is just one of the most brilliant games with the game mechanics they've got in there as well. Very, very underrated in my opinion in just the innovation that they brought in. They brought in innovation, for example, in Panzer Corps 2, which we'll get to eventually. Actually, I might leave that for then. If I remember, there's a lot of years between then and there, so we'll sort of work our way through. To sort of skip my way forward a little bit, you've got, for example, as we get towards the end of 2011, we've got Unity of Commands at the Stalingrad campaign. Unity of Command was like a free game on Steam. The base game was free, and then you sort of buy the additions for it. Again, I didn't really get into that one all that much. It was very much a bit like Panzer Corps for me, the way it sort of played out, but I didn't play a real lot of it. Time of Fury, I think that was another Agioid game, maybe, or maybe wrong about that. I didn't play that one, so I don't know that one. Conflict of Heroes, Awakening the Bear, I don't know that one. So there's a lot here I don't actually know. Team Assault, don't know that one as well. So there's a lot in here that I was probably playing Distant Worlds, I think, at that stage. I would imagine in this sort of era. Again, more decisive campaigns that I really, really regret that I didn't play. Combat Mission, Fortress Italy. I did have that one, but from Battlefront at that stage. And then Panzer Corps Africa Corps. So again, lots and lots of, in fact, you don't see that, sorry. Panzer Corps Africa Corps back and through there. You can see there's a whole lot of like Panzer Corps Grand Campaigns, Command of the Great War, Close Combat, Panthers in the Fog, and then History Legends of War pattern. So there's, and again, I think it may have been for the History Channel. But this is all now into 2012. Battle of the Bulge. Actually, I forget who actually was the developer of that one. I got that one in grey, so I'm not sure if that means it came in late to Slitherine for some reason, but I can't think of what the context of that one actually was. And then we end up with the Panzer Corps Gold Edition, basically in November of 2012. Which essentially is sort of like the compilation of everything put together. In fact, you can see there, we've got the mega pack there as well. I shouldn't have put all these Panzer Corps. I was trying not to put in extensions. I was just trying to put in base games. But essentially, the Panzer Corps, there's a lot of development on it. It sort of runs it, and then it runs its course. Now, again, I didn't play a real lot of those because of the lack of procedural generation of the maps, and so I wasn't really playing that all that much. Rise of Prussia Gold in through there again as well. So there's a whole range of games. I'll just skip over a lot of these. Fantasy Commander, Eucarian Wars is one that I never actually played. Now, we get to one of the other interesting games in the list, which is, well, they're all interesting, but for me, this is interesting. So Pandora First Contact, which is heavily inspired by Sid Meier's Alpha Centauri. This was like the first in what ended up becoming like quite an ongoing series of games into right now, to be honest. This is the precursor to Warhammer 40,000 Gladius, Relics of War. But this was done some years before that. So this was sort of like the early, not the early attempt, because this was actually a pretty cool game. Very, very difficult. The difficulty level in through here was just next level. And they kept on fine-tuning the AI to the point where this and Gladius and then Zephon, which is their latest game for the developer, like particularly like in Gladius and things, the actual AI is incredible. It feels like you're playing a human, and so it's something that I would rate this the highest, the best AI I've ever played against. Not Pandora, but probably Gladius, I would think, would be sort of in that category. Just phenomenal what they've been able to do with that one. It takes a lot of gameplay to figure out how to, or what triggers the AI to make it do different things, because the algorithms that the AI uses in that game are so deep. Like for example, if you don't go in with enough forces to wipe out a city when you're. This is in Gladius. We'll talk about Gladius at the time, but this is where it started. This Pandora is where all of this development sort of started with the AI and also with the game mechanics. To be honest, of Gladius, and as this is the beginning. Which, and again, very very enjoyable game. Very very hard though. I think that the Gladius for me is a much better game, not just because it's more modern, but just the overall balance of it feels better to me than this game did. This one was very, as I said before, heavily inspired by Alpha Centauri, and I didn't like it. For me, I didn't love Alpha Centauri. I know a lot of people did, but this was sort of like almost like a modern remake of that particular game. I guess you wouldn't call it that modern now, given its era, but back in that sort of era. But it's for me, it was an awesomely good game. All right, we're going to be moving into 2014 now, and Quadriga. Actually, before I do that, I do actually remember now what this grey is. This is from the Shenandoah Games company, and so this was before these were marketed through Slitherine, is my understanding of these. But there is a time when Shenandoah and Slitherine get together, and then these become a bit like Matrix as well, with the different games where there's sort of like a connection. They were working together, and then essentially they sort of then joined forces to then sort of form a lot of these very particular war games again. So you can see the sort of niche gaming that's actually going on. Quadriga, what a great game this was. This is actually a chariot racing game. I love this game. Like, it was a beer and pretzels game. Meaning you could sort of play it very, very quickly. You didn't have to really sort of know a lot about the game to actually enjoy it. There was, I hope it still is, a Quadriga 2 essentially, or a spiritual successor which has been in development. I haven't heard anything about it for probably 12 months, unfortunately. Ancient Chariots, I think is what it's called. Something like that. Anyway, I'm hoping that that's going to be another Slitherine game. I'm hoping that it's in development. I've been really looking forward to sort of seeing that particular game. I know that they were working on other games before they went to work on that one, but I haven't actually asked about that. That's one game I'm going to have to start asking some questions about. So I said there's a few little games that that I'm interested in that sort of you don't really hear much about, and that's Ancient Chariots is probably one of the ones that I'm really looking forward to, just because I enjoyed Quadriga so much. Like, it was just such a fantastic chariot racing game where you sort of manage like a stable of charioteers and had to sort of work them through. But great little game, that one. Still enjoyable even now, but it's getting a bit old now, I guess. We have a whole lot of different sort of games now. So sort of start to scroll through 2014. We've got Frontline, Road to War. We've of course got one of my favourite games of all time, Distant Worlds Universe. And so this is the original Distant Worlds. And Universe was the essentially the compilation of all of the different bits and pieces. I guess the interesting thing about this one was really this was where Distant Worlds went to the Steam library. Before then, you could only really buy it through the Matrix Game Store or the Slitherine Game Store. So Distant Worlds, the very first iteration of it came out in 2010. And then there was sort of additions then sort of added into it, but it was very much a Matrix game. And Eric Rutan still, like from Matrix Games, is really like very heavily involved in the development to this day of the Distant Worlds 2, which is, I love that game, absolutely love it. Incredible series of games. Of course, starting with Distant Worlds Universe, it just seemed like such an incredible idea for a game, and then just having like essentially a single developer build this game that just had such an incredible scope, much greater scope than I think any other space game that I've ever played, and of course Distant Worlds 2 has sort of continued on in the same sort of vein, and gotten better and better and better. But this is sort of where it sort of all started, particularly for Slitherine. So I'm thinking that this date is possibly because of the Steam release. And I can't remember exactly when that actually came in, but this was a time when Slitherine started to embrace Steam a lot more often than what they had in the past. They'd sort of relied on their own marketing to sort of sell games because they were such a niche gamer. They still actually have a lot of games that they don't release on Steam, by the way, but they do actually have now a lot that will maybe release, like some of the more niche games might release on the Matrix store or the Slitherine store, and then later release on Steam. But in this case, the Distant Worlds Universe was I think one of the first games that they actually brought to Steam, from what I can remember at the time, because I was thinking This is a great move. It takes because the Distant Worlds franchise really at that stage for me had much broader appeal than the niche games that a lot of the Matrix games actually had at that stage, and so I was very happy to sort of see it go to an even broader audience. It's one of those games where everyone should have a copy of it. Not so much Universe now, but Distant Worlds 2. Absolutely love it. Let's scroll down through our little list and just see what else we've got. We've got Close Combat, Gateway to Kain through there. There is actually one of these. Actually, no, it'll be coloured, because it'll be coloured orange when Slitherine starts to take over the actual development. Civil War 2 and through there. Advanced Tactics Gold. Wow, what a great game. I've already spoken about Advanced Tactics and sort of the history of VR designs and sort of how they sort of started with a free game and then to Advanced Tactics, ending up with Advanced Tactics Gold, which is still actually getting updates even now. And then, of course, into the Decisive Campaign series of games, and then finally into Shadow Empire. But this was a very important game for me, in terms of it was one of my favourite games for an awfully long period of time. It's a bit old for me now. I struggle to play it, but random maps, it really is the precursor to Shadow Empire. I think now that we've got Shadow Empire, I don't think I would ever play this again. It's sort of, we're too spoilt. Shadow Empire just does everything so damn well. This game did it well as well, though, I've got to say. This is where it all sort of started. Very, very good game. Right, we've now got a big, long list of games that sort of come back through. We'll start with Battle Academy 2, the Eastern Front. In fact, I can't even show all the games that are actually going to be here. We're missing a few, so I'll just mention them. I've actually got it sort of clipped off the side. In fact, maybe I can actually do it this way. If I stretch that up, is that going to work? I'll just try to fix it. Yeah, that's better. What I've done actually down the bottom there, you can now sort of see all the little coloured dots, which is actually quite interesting in itself. You can sort of see right from the back here where the I can't really sort of show it with my cursor where all the orange dots are. That was when Slitherine first started. Then we start to see a compression of blue dots, which is when they're sort of publishing different things. And we're now sort of getting into like 2014, where we've got Battle Academy 2 comes out at this stage. Again, one of these games that I sort of thought would go further than what it actually did do. I mentioned Battle Academy 1 back in a few years before this one. And you'll see also down through here we've got the Shenandoah, they become 88mm games. They then merge, and there's still a very, very deep connection between the companies. With the 88mm games do a lot of the wargamey type sort of stuff. They get involved in a lot of that for Slitherine as we sort of go through that particular list. Command Modern Operations. This is a game I haven't played much of, to be honest. I'll just scroll through here. So Command Modern Operations is a game that has got a lot of a lot of people love this game, because of the realism that it actually does have. I haven't actually played it, but we'll just mention it there because it certainly deserves an honorary mention. And then Buzz Aldrin's Space Program Manager really came out at the wrong time. And to sort of talk about it, it came out when Kerbal Space Program was really, really smashing this genre to bits, and it really nothing could compete. This is of course Kerbal Space Program 1. I just wonder what would have happened if this game had have come out after Kerbal Space Program 2, because that was a shockingly bad launch of that particular game. Nothing to do with Slitherine, of course, but I always found that this Buzz Aldrin Space Program Manager just couldn't reach what Kerbal had already captured by that stage, unfortunately. So that for me was one of those games where I'm thinking, just wrong time, I think, for that game. Just because there was, Kerbal Space Program had sort of really taken that space, and so it was a difficult to move into that particular space. That's a really long lot. You can see there's a lot going on in 2014 at that stage. There's games like Hell, for example, which I actually quite enjoyed. This is actually, I think, one that was based a little bit on the Battlefield Academy. So I think that was sort of the same sort of one that came through there. Alla Jacta Est is another one of the Agiod games, which was actually then to do with, I think, with Caesar. Flashpoint campaigns. We now start to see the Flashpoint campaigns coming through as well. So Red Storm, Players Edition. So there's a whole lot of Flashpoint campaigns that are then developed by Slitherine. Again, I haven't really played much of those games. I've been asked to look at them, by different people at different times. But it's again the complexity. I think for me is just I've got too many other games that I try to get reasonably good at to be able to cover. It's just there's too many games, unfortunately, out there. Then we end up with an interesting one. This is Warhammer 40,000 Armageddon. And Armageddon was actually the first of Slitherine's games that actually went into the Games Workshop, your Warhammer 40,000, or even any of the Warhammer universes. And so we ended up with sort of like a fairly interesting game. So if you were into sort of Warhammer, this was in an era where a lot of Warhammer games were coming out. Like it looks like, I think Games Workshop at this time was allowing people very limited abilities to sort of build games where they had a lot of limitation on what they could actually put out, but there's a lot of games coming out, and a lot of them are really, really bad, like terribly bad. Right across the world, there was games coming out for using the Games Workshop license, and I think it's tightened up an awful lot since then, which is really, really good because we're now getting some really great Warhammer games that are coming out. But in this instance, I think there was a limitation, like you'd only have like 2 factions, things like that. It was awkward. So the game had to prove itself, and it had to then prove itself within the lore. It had to prove itself also, as a success. And so Armageddon really was the first of these that came to Slitherine. I think this has just been taken out of the Steam Workshop at this point in time, but it has been a very, very good game for a long period of time. Like it's over 10 years now. Certainly, there's better Warhammer games now that like including Gladius, of course, which I think has just sort of crushed all of the Warhammer games when it came out. I think for me that's still one of the best Warhammer games ever made. I still love playing it. I'll happily play that anytime. And again, mainly because of the AI. I just love I love what the AI does in that game. It's not an easy game, but it's always rewarding and rich to play. Anyway, Armageddon was a very good game when it did come out in November of 2014. We've got Frontline, The Longest Day. That's the last of that little area. Then we go back up to Vietnam 65. Now, this was an interesting game as well. I won't bring up a screen for it, but essentially what was interesting about this one is it started to get into the more modern games. Actually, it will, because this is, I think, an important transition for the company and also for the approach with some of the games. I'll just move the everything over a little bit, just so we can sort of have that more in the middle now, as we head towards 10 years in the past. Anyway, Vietnam 65 was an interesting game because what they had to do was have very, very asymmetric sort of victories for either side. Like the Americans had to, or the Americans and forces essentially had to, not lose troops, and the North Vietnamese had to, sort of the communist forces had like a different sort of criteria where losing numbers wasn't really a big deal for them, but it was for the Americans. And so the game mechanics were really quite different. I didn't cover it much, and the main reason for that is I didn't, like there was, whenever I did cover it, I was getting like a lot of almost political type sort of discussions would then sort of start in my chat. And so for me, it was actually too modern to play. And so I've always avoided games like where there is this sort of contention. So it's sort of, and it was interesting to sort of see the way that the game actually did work with the way that it did sort of balance out the different asymmetry of the opposing forces, which I thought was actually interesting from a game mechanic perspective. But as I said, I didn't really play it that often, just because of that contention that I was sort of finding, within people that were sort of watching the game. So out of respect for that, I sort of stopped really covering it at that point. Which is another game that is going to be coming up about the Iraq War, and for similar reasons I didn't actually play that either. The historical aspect of it, I think, is what sort of turns me off. Having said that, there are, like playing modern games, like where it's not specifically historical, I feel I can sort of cover that on my channel, and also, so there's, and even the Cold War type games, where the Cold War goes hot, sort of the alt history type things, I've got no problem playing those, but just with the, I know that there's a lot of veterans that watch the channel, and so I don't really want to be, sort of going into the actual history of things too much. if that makes any sort of sense. And anyway, we'll just continue on. So Vietnam 65, it was interesting because of the game mechanics. It was quite different to sort of see what had been added to that particular game at that point. Order of Battle Pacific, coming back into here into April of 2015. Starhammer, the Vanguard Prophecy. I didn't ever play this, but this was sort of like a space combat type game. Revolution Under Siege, Legions of Steel. Here we go, Pike and Shot campaigns. Now, actual Pike and Shot came out about a year, or more than a year before that, in early 2014. And really, this is actually very, very important. We spoke about, actually, I'll just get the screen up. Now, when we were talking about Field of Glory, the first iteration of the game and all of the different bits and pieces that were coming, I had mentioned that I had been on to Slitherine about, please give me more content for Field of Glory. And the answer I was getting back all the time was, just hold on, you know, we're doing something here. We're not going to tell you what it is until it comes out. Anyway, they brought out Pike and Shot. And what this is, Pike and Shot, great little game. It's actually the precursor to Field of Glory 2. So it used the mechanics, the Field of Glory tabletop mechanics, but taking it beyond the Middle Ages into the era of Pike and Shot. And so this is actually, I know that there's people who would love to see a more modern, or like this one redone again, you know, in that sort of like taking the medieval era further forward and actually sort of playing with this one. But Pike and Shot was almost like the Skunk Works, you know, sort of figuring out what to do with the upcoming Field of Glory franchise that was about to sort of launch on us, that I had no idea about. I was still asking for the original. But so Pike and Shot was a very, very pleasant surprise when it did actually come out. They released a couple of different variations. One of the things with all of the Field of Glory games is they're tabletop battles. They don't have any sort of campaign. And so by 2015, Pike and Shot campaigns was where they started to cobble together like a bit of a campaign that you then sort of play your way through. And so the basic campaigns then became a bit of a staple of the Field of Glory franchise, with Field of Glory 2 coming out soon afterwards. And now, of course, we end up with the incredible campaign sort of aspect of Field of Glory Empires and Field of Glory Kingdoms. So you know, where we've got like a much more strategic game rather than just a tactical game. But certainly these released as a tactical game, but extremely well done. Anyway, that's Pike and Shot. So that was an important game in leaping into the more modern era of Field of Glory, just with the way that the tabletop was then sort of handled away from that original sort of style of gameplay. So again, me bitching and whining about trying to get a new DLC for the original. I'm glad that they didn't listen at all and just kept on their merry way and developed Pike and Shot, and then sort of led on, of course, to, well, you can see it there, Sengoku Jidai, Shadow of the Shogun. That was essentially another tabletop variation on the Field of Glory tabletop system, and again, just getting ready for Field of Glory 2. Great, I loved it, absolutely loved it. Now, I didn't play Ravenmark. I didn't really get into that one that much. I did have it, but I didn't actually play it. Heroes of Normandy, played that one, but don't remember much about it, to be honest. I've got to be mindful that the time is slipping away, and we've still got 10 years of content to cover, and we've certainly got some more modern things to sort of cover in through there. Command, Northern Inferno, so again, more of the Command type games. Victory and Glory, Napoleon. Polaris Sector is a game that I actually really enjoyed a lot. This was sort of like, this is a game that, in fact, I'll show you this one. Yeah, it was a fairly simple sort of space game to a large degree, where there was choke points you had to try to control. But there was an awesome mod that was made for it, a Star Wars mod. And so I used to play that Star Wars mod a lot. I used to love this game. And so this developer has then gone on to build ICBM for Slitherine. And ICBM Escalation is now the most recent one that they've actually brought out. I don't tend to play those sorts of, again, modern-ish games. I also don't really like nuclear war games. So again, it just, I don't know why, it just doesn't gel with me, just from a personal perspective. But I did really enjoy Polaris Sector. This was actually a very, very cool little game when it came out. Let's move across and see what we've got. So we've got Combat Mission, more Combat Missions sort of coming through. Again, not yet published by Slitherine at that stage. Decisive Campaigns, Barbarossa in 2016. Again, I missed all of these until, I don't know when I started playing them, but it was many years after they first came out. Order of Battle World War II, Wars of Napoleon, Sengoku Jidai. This is actually the Japanese version, essentially, of medieval fighting using the Field of Glory mechanics. Again, great little game. Last Days of Old Earth. This is actually a really, really interesting game. Actually, I will talk about this one. Yeah, so Last Days of Old Earth was actually one of the games that I really, really enjoyed an awful lot. This is essentially a more modern take on Armageddon Empires. If you ever sort of had played that game back in the 90s, I think was when that one was developed, using the precursor to Flash of all things. Like, remember the Flash games? Well, that was actually, that original Armageddon Empires was actually built in a program called Macromedia Director, and which is, I would sort of use it for other things, but it wasn't designed for making games, but the guy, I forget his name, the developer of Armageddon Empires, did a great job of putting together a few games actually using that as his, because he wasn't a programmer, but he did a great job of Armageddon Empires. And so Last Days of Old Earth was essentially a bit of a remake of that, not bit for bit, but it certainly felt like playing the original Armageddon Empires, but in a more modern interface. So I absolutely loved this game, but no one else did. So it sort of fell out the back of things. But for me, it was actually an extremely enjoyable game. So I really did quite enjoy this one. This was one of those games I just wish that that other people enjoyed it as much as what I did, because I thoroughly enjoyed it. Again, I had loved Armageddon Empires back in the day, so maybe that was the reason that I sort of enjoyed this one just so much. Let's see what else we got. Nothing else down in that list. We'll go back up the top. Of course, this is Armageddon, just with adding the orcs in at that stage. So again, I thought I'd sort of culled out all of the DLC, but anyway, there's a bit of a DLC in through there. Panzer Corps Gold Edition 2016 in through this side. This is sort of the end of the development of Panzer Corps. So I've left this one in because I've got a few Panzer Corps in there of DLCs, which I shouldn't have really left in, but essentially this is the end of that development, and then they can sort of start to work on Panzer Corps 2, which is a work of art, really, with what they end up doing. We've then got a few of the strategic command type games. I'll just move along a little bit. So strategic command, World War II, War in Europe. These are fairly mid-level war games, the strategic command war games. Pretty cool the way they sort of then go and work. And then we've got two very, very interesting games. You can see there, Warhammer 40,000 Sanctus Reach and Sovereignty Crown of Kings. My big, big disappointment. I'll talk about each of these. I'll talk briefly about Sanctus Reach, and then I'll talk a little bit about Sovereignty Crown of Kings, and sort of, I don't know what happened there. Anyway, I'll talk about it. So Sanctus Reach was another of the Warhammer 40,000 games that Slitherine sort of was involved in as the publisher. And this one, again, only had sort of like limited forces you could then go and play. It was certainly still in that era where Games Workshop were sort of limiting what people could do within their franchise, but they're letting sort of anything happen. This was another very, very good game, though, that sort of came through. You just had to sort of try to take cover behind objects. I think it was mainly just the orcs and the Space Marines that were sort of then playing with this particular. I don't think it was anyone else that sort of came into this one, but it was very, very cool the way it sort of did work. The way the game sort of did function. Nice mechanics. I think it was actually, this one was based a lot on the Battlefield Academy engine, I think, this particular one, but great little game. So this was Sanctus Reach, and I think that this one's also now been taken off Steam. So it's sort of now they've just sort of pulled back on having these because they've got they've got two more Warhammer 40,000 titles which are incredibly good, and so they're probably taking these off just because they're a little bit too old. But they've only been taken off in recent months. Then we come to my big, big disappointment. Well, actually, it will be one of my big disappointments if Ancient Chariots doesn't come out. So this is Sovereignty Crown of Kings. I'll put up a screenshot. Now, this is one of those games that you would start off essentially somewhere in the map. Like, basically you would choose a location to sort of get started. They all had incredible depth and history about what each one actually did do, and they had different abilities when you sort of then went and sort of took over a particular area. Some of them were evil, some of them were good. I forget where they all actually were. I think Son and Eve was actually like a realm of elves, so it was very much fantasy sort of game, and so it was fantasy, but with a real war game twist to it, which I just fell in love with. And so I loved the idea of this game, like from when I first laid my eyes on it. And so it was a game that was released, but it was always broken, always. And I mean that every single time that anything was fixed, it would break three other things. And so the development was an absolute nightmare. And so every time there was an update, I would race in thinking, oh, they've fixed it finally. They've finally got it all working. And you start playing it, and then something else would there'd be a crash for something else. And so it ended up being so frustrating. And I don't know what the history of this game was, but God, it was the one game that I've got to say that I was really sorry and sad that it never actually got finished properly, because for me it had incredible potential. And it's certainly like the gaming aspect. In fact, I put out, look, this was actually how you'd then go and choose your starting faction. You can see there the map was always preset, but then the actual battles themselves were more random. So it was a really nice combination. But you actually had this sort of like this fantasy aspect of the game, depending on who you played as. They would give you different bonuses, and the areas that you would then sort of take over, all the little areas that you're sort of seeing through here could then be claimed, and they would give you other bonuses as well. So it was very, very well thought out, very, very poorly executed. So that's sort of the problem. But again, this is a game that I really, really loved the idea of, and I enjoyed playing it until it broke. But it always broke every single time you played it. It'd be interesting to see if anyone else actually remembers this game and felt as strongly about wanting it to be a success as what I did. So the combat itself actually would, you have like each little sort of card would have a sort of different attack values, and as I said, the mechanics and the thinking behind it was really, really solid. You then actually have like different areas on the map that you could then sort of position things, move them in, coming in from different territories, and so on and so forth. It was, as I said, for me, a hell of a lot of promise, but just really never worked. Like it was always broken all the time. And as I said, every time they'd fix one thing, three other things would break. And it really was like that. It wasn't just like they would fix one thing and one thing would break. They'd fix one thing and things that they fixed the previous time would then break after that. So it was, I think the development of that one was just really, really poor, but just from an outsider trying to play the game. But the actual design of the game I thought was really, really solid. So yeah, it's disappointing, that one. This is my big disappointment in the whole of the Slitherine stable of games. But I am also really hopeful that Ancient Chariots does come at some point, because I've been looking forward to that one as well. But having said that, I haven't been able to play that game. This game I played for, must have been years. It felt like years. It was every single time there was an update, bang, I would be onto it, trying to play it, trying to sort of get it to work, and then it would just fail. So this was a game that I really, really liked the idea of. Afghanistan 11, very similar to Vietnam. I just really felt I shouldn't play it, just out of respect to veterans, etc. So I sort of didn't play that one. Command Chains of War, didn't really play that one. Carrier Decker didn't play. Gettysburg, the Tide Turns. I wasn't all that interested, I've got to say, in actual Civil War games, to be honest. I've since sort of realised just how big this war was, and I really just wasn't aware of just the scope of the actual war itself. So that was sort of interesting. Gary Grigsby's another big one, War in the West. I'd probably be more inclined to sort of try this one, but again, they scare the crap out of me, basically. So it's sort of one of those things where I just find the scope just too big for me, like in terms of being able to then go and sort of do it. Now we end up with a few different games which are actually really quite important for Slitherine, and also great games for us gamers. So we'll start off with Battlestar Galactica Deadlock. This game was like a WeGo game, where you'd sort of plan your turn, and the enemy would then plan their turn, and it would play out, and whatever you'd sort of coded in would then sort of work. And this is, I think, I still struggle to think of a game that's better at doing this than what Battlestar Galactica Deadlock actually did in terms of the actual space combat. So it's sort of like, really, I'm just trying to think of another game that actually does this even half as good. And the only game I can really think of that does this in a similar sort of style is another Slitherine game, which is Scramble, Battle of Britain. And but it's a different genre. You know, this one here was like you had the full Battlestar Galactica sort of approach to things. The thing I used to, so I loved the combat in this game. Like, I absolutely loved it. It was top notch. Where the game failed for me, or where it was sort of weak, was the campaign. I always felt the campaign was really, really sketchy, but that's mainly because of the lore that it comes from, and also the voice scripting and acting was very juvenile. And I still remember sort of always saying that. And I think the developers must have hated me sort of saying that one, because I just really couldn't stomach it. Like so they did actually end up with some voice chatter which you could actually have playing in the background, and that made a world of difference for me, because I would turn the voices off, because if you were in a war situation, there's no way that you'd be talking the way that they spoke in this game. Like, it was just, as I said before, it was like teenagers in charge of everything in the Battlestar. You know, like it was, but an incredible game nonetheless. So I know that I just remember sort of thinking that I was I always hated the voice acting in the game, and hated the scripting, but I loved the game. So it's sort of one of those things where I was sort of on opposite ends of stuff, but the actual gameplay itself was just next level stuff. And as I said before, I really struggle to think of a game that does a better job of managing the combat. I loved it, absolutely loved it. So when it came out in its time. Next game is, of course, the big one, or one of the big ones, Field of Glory 2. Here we are. So this is actually, of course, now we've had Pike and Shot, we've had Sengoku Jidai, and then we finally get to what they've really been building up to, which is the replacement for the original Field of Glory sort of tabletop experience with Field of Glory 2. And of course, it starts off in the ancient era, and this again was where I sort of started to, like, I was interested, because what they did was they took it from the sort of like the early ancient era through the Roman era. You know, it's adding different eras onto it, and my favourite of the original game was the actual, like, when we got to the Battle of Agincourt and things like that in the Middle Ages. So I was always looking, they're going to get there eventually. They're going to keep on adding DLCs that will then take us into that era. And I knew the actual naming of the actual DLCs from that original game, and also from the tabletop game. And so we got to the 800s AD. I'm thinking the next one is 1000s. So, like, we're sort of getting into the 1000s, 1200s. We're getting to it's not the Field of Arrows. I forget what it's called. Not Flaming Arrows. I can't think of something arrows. It was about the longbows, and I just couldn't wait. And so again, I was always asking, when are you going to bring out the next DLC? Like, after the Viking, I really enjoyed the Viking, I forget what that one's called, Wolves from the Sea or something. Anyway, whatever that one was, I really enjoyed that. I sort of enjoyed the more modern sort of style. That sort of took us into the early Middle Ages, really, with that particular DLC pack, with the bringing the Viking invasions into the game. So I was really looking forward to them sort of bringing out the next DLC, and of course there's a massive delay, and I'm thinking, what the hell? Like, it's just add some longbows and some knights and things like that. And of course they were working on Field of Glory 2 Medieval. I didn't know that. Of course, I was there just being a pain in the ass, asking for the next DLC, which actually then essentially Medieval was of course much better than what I was asking for yet again in this franchise. But I love this franchise. I just love what it does do. The original Field, like when the original Field of Glory was replaced with Field of Glory 2, it was a major upgrade in terms of the way that the mechanics actually worked. I know that the tabletop mechanics were slightly different between the two games. I feel that this one's actually more pure to the actual tabletop rules, I think, as my understanding of how things sort of do work. I know that the Phalanxes actually had a way of working in the old game, which I don't think was exactly the way it sort of worked in the actual tabletop. But I may be wrong about that. But of course, this is one of my favourite games. This whole franchise, with what sort of came out. So this was the sort of like the big leap forward in terms of the Ancients game. And as I said before, my main interest is in the Medieval, more so than the Ancients. So, but I did enjoy this game a lot when it first came out. And of course, you can play. It's just such a broad game with what you can play in this particular game. It's just phenomenal what they've actually done with this. So the next game we got is Mare Nostrum. This is actually a game that I didn't like. Actually, I didn't like. I didn't play much of it. This is actually made by the makers of Quadriga, the chariot racing game. But this was actually still in the ancient arenas. But we had like an arena combat of warships. But I just never got into it. So that for me was not something that I was all that interested in. Operational Art of War then actually came across to Slitherine. This was actually Operational Art of War 4. Operational Art of War is essentially like a toolkit for building war games. I loved it back in the day, like back in around the year 2000-ish. I would happily make little maps and things and sort of see how things worked. It was sort of I did enjoy that one a lot. Anyway, that came to Slitherine. I've just popped it in there for that reason. Strategic Command, World War II, Global Conflict, Command, the Silent Service, Check Your Six. I don't remember playing that, but I remember being aware of it. Empires Apart, I don't remember that one either. Let's go back. We're now at 2018, March to Glory. Don't really remember that one much. Strategic Command, World War II, that's quite a big one. Big game with a lot of additions. Now we get to one of the other big ones for me anyway, a Gladius 40,000 Relics of War. Anyway, let's have a quick look. Yeah, so this for me is been the best Warhammer 40,000 game. Like for me personally, I just love it. It's with all the different DLC as well. It's one of these games that just gets better and better. There's still, even though it's like the game is like 7 or 8 years old now, they're still making DLC for it because it's that popular and people just enjoy playing it. I love it. Love this game enormously. Again, the AI is incredible in this game. Like it's going to be one of the best gaming experiences if you can appreciate just how the AI does play. Sometimes you'll find that the AI is attacking other AI and will and damage them badly. So it seems like the AI isn't all that effective, but it's because of other combat that's gone on. It's phenomenal what the AI will actually end up doing. Like if you happen to be the brunt of what an AI decides to do, you will know it in this game. But if you happen to be able, and so what I do is I turtle away from the combat until I'm ready, and then I move out. So I'm very, very cautious with this game because I know how the AI sort of works. If you move out and scout too far too quickly, you will then attract the ire of the AI near you, and then they will come after you and you will suffer badly. The AI doesn't cheat really in the game unless you sort of set it up for cheats, but essentially there's very little cheating that the AI actually does to do what it does do. It just does such a great job of actually playing the game like a human player. So anyway, Gladius, Warhammer 40,000, Gladius Relics of War, fantastic game, and with the different DLCs. The thing I like about this game as well, whenever I play it, I always mention this. The 4 starting factions are really, really good. Like you've got the Space Marines. This all comes in the base game. Space Marines, Necrons. So you've got sort of like the Necron forces. You've got the Orcs, and you've also then got the Astra Militarum, and they all play very, very differently. And so just even with those 4, you'll know if you like the game from just playing the base game. And quite often the base game is actually now for free at different times. So it can either be like $5 at different times. Sometimes it'll be free. So usually when there's a special where the Gladius is involved, it's very, very cheap. But then the DLCs, if you enjoy that, you're going to love the DLCs as well. And of course, there's now a fair few of them because it's been in development for so long. But what a great franchise of games this has become. It's just awesomely good. We've got one more Warhammer 40,000 game to talk about, which is starting to sort of close that gap between itself and this game as well, which we'll talk about as we sort of get to it later in this presentation. Geez, this is going to be a long video, guys. A long video. We've still got a long way to go. I'll try to rush things through a little bit faster. What are we up to? We've got the Warhammer 40,000 through there. I'll just go back across, skim through a few of these. Wars of Succession. Yep. Aggressors, Ancient Rome. I did enjoy this game. I won't sort of pull it up. I know I've got to start moving ahead here a little bit. I didn't love it, but I did enjoy it a lot. So it's sort of like it's top tier games for me that Slitherine have got. It's 2, Gladius, Shadow Empire. They're the 3 that I always just spring to mind. But then there's a whole lot of games underneath that for me that are very, very good games. And Aggressors was actually sort of in that sort of category. Strategic Command, World War II, World at War again, another big one. Actually, we had Strategic Command World War Two, World at War. That's, I think, an expansion on that. I think somehow, I forget how that one works. I'm thinking, hang on, we just had that. Command Desert Storm, more Command games. Field of Glory Empires. We have to talk about this one, of course. This is a very, very important game in the Field of Glory story. So with Field of Glory Empires, one of the problems with Field of Glory was that the tabletop mechanics really just suited battles. So the campaigns were always very, very sketchy, very, very lightweight, and they still are within the base games of the different games that have come out for Field of Glory. There hasn't been a really good campaign generator within the actual Field of Glory system itself. So we end up with these. There was a need for it to actually have some way of connecting the Field of Glory franchise, the Field of Glory battles within a strategic game. Now, Field of Glory Empires was the first one of these games that came out using the original Field of Glory 2 that was then developed. And so this was actually, at its core, it's a full-blown strategy game that uses the Field of Glory system for not for its combat, but you can export the battles out if you have Field of Glory 2. So you can actually export the battles out, even if you don't actually have all the DLC. You just need the base game to then be able to play the battles within your own, that you export from the game itself. Having said that, Field of Glory Empires is a standalone game. It's got its own battle system that works very, very well, and so it's actually like an auto battler that actually takes place. The way it works is that you give orders for the turn, and then it's a WeGo system again, where all of the empires then give their orders. They all play out in progression across the actual year itself or the turn itself. And during that phase, as different battles come up, they will then play out. But they are designed to be an auto battler at its core, but you can export those out and play it in Field of Glory 2. And that works for me. I love that. It's a bit clunky and it's a bit confusing if you don't really know what's going on. And they have fixed that a lot in Field of Glory Kingdoms now, so that it feels like there's a lot more automation. If you've got both of the Field of Glory 2 Medieval and Field of Glory Kingdoms, you will be able to play those battles out much more easily than you could from Empires. You had to there's a bit of closing things, opening things to sort of get the battles, but it still worked very, very well. And so this again was, Agiod had sort of really, finessed how the intricacies of trade would work and things like that, just with the game mechanics. So you've got this incredible strategy game, where you're sort of like playing from a macro level, and then you could export the actual battles to play on a micro level for the actual combat itself. And for me, it worked incredibly well. And so this was a big important sort of addition to the whole Field of Glory approach to things, which I thought was fantastic. So again, as a gamer, thank you. I loved it. I love that this actually came in with everything that was actually going on. Then we actually get straight after that, like in September of 2019, we end up with Fantasy General 2, essentially the start of that particular sort of franchise as well, where this was actually a really, really, like the combat mechanics in this game, again, were very, very good with the way that sort of did play. My only sort of real problem with this game was just the scope of the campaign. There was no sort of randomization with that at all, and also the factions. There was very limited factions at the start of this particular one, but it was following on from Fantasy General. So like the original Fantasy General, which it's sort of funny, like I played Fantasy General a lot back in the 90s when it was out, and I loved it, and I don't remember it being limited. But it was, and it's sort of funny how you look through at things with rose-coloured glasses, and in this instance, the game sort of followed the same sort of the same approach with the different factions and the way it sort of worked. And I didn't realise, back at the time, I guess you're spoilt back in those early years. You're thinking, oh, it's this is awesome, and then 20 odd years later, you're sort of playing something else. You think, oh, there should be more. You sort of expect more, but the game mechanics itself are really, really cool. So my problems with this game were very, very minor. Just wanted sort of more sort of diverse groups to sort of then go and play with in the actual game itself. But awesome mechanics. This game has just got really, really good combat mechanics. It works very, very well. So overall the actual game design very, very solid, but for me just didn't have quite enough of the actual forces in there to sort of flesh it out. I think they sort of added other things over time, but I didn't really play a lot of it. I guess just because again the rose-colored glasses from when I had played the original sort of had kicked in for me a little bit in that sort of sense. But as I say, I do remember the game mechanics and being really quite impressed with the way it sort of did work. What else have we got through here? We've got next one down is actually one of the other ones that you'll see that there's very few orange colours that sort of come up in this list now. This is something that Slitherine has developed themselves. So they're the developer and the publisher of Close Combat: The Bloody First. So they actually sort of developed this one. This is I think the only one that they actually sort of really did work on. I won't open it up, but that was sort of like another one of the Close Combat. I think it's the last of the Close Combat games. Now we end up with another really, really important game. This is Armoured Brigade. So Armoured Brigade was a it was a real-time game that you can pause and sort of follow things through. It's very, very brutally accurate sort of with the way things that sort of do work in the game. It's actually quite hard to play the way it does play, and you play on these monstrously large maps that you then sort of choose which portion you're going to play on. It's a very unique system of building campaigns. It's got like a dynamic campaign system, which is actually a lot of fun. I was actually playing Armoured Brigade 2 earlier today, streaming it on my channel, just because I do enjoy this game so much. It's an awesome game. So anyway, this is Armoured Brigade. We'll talk about Armoured Brigade 2. This was a difficult game to actually try to visualise what was happening in 3D, because you didn't have 3D, but we now have 3D in Armoured Brigade 2. That's the big change that sort of now has come in this particular franchise of games. Right, we'll just move over a bit more. So we've then got Command Modern Operations in November of 2019. This is a game, again, that people just love playing. I haven't actually played it, so I can't really comment on this one, but just seeing on how people actually gravitate to this particular game, it looks like it's one of the special ones. More strategic command, World War I in this instance. Enjoyable game, again, fairly entry level in terms of wargaming. Astra Exodus, I didn't play that one. Panzer Corps 2, we've got to talk about this one here. This for me is actually was such an important game, and I know it was very difficult for the developers to make it. I'll just get a screen up. Yeah, so this Panzer Corps 2 sort of now takes what Panzer Corps had done, the original Panzer Corps, and has now sort of made it so that the AI can actually play the game in a much more solid way, which then allows you to play random maps. And for me, that was massive, because I absolutely love seeing random maps, because I know how difficult it is to actually code AI to play on them. And so a lot of the war games that actually do have where they have to program how units respond and what they do, it's not easy at all. And so it was a major change for them to actually pivot from a script-based game into a game that did have a lot, that could be played with AI, with the AI sort of playing the turn. When I say AI, I don't mean sort of like Chat GPT or anything. I mean, basically the algorithm for the game itself for playing out the actual turns for each actual unit. And so that was awesome. The other thing I found really interesting with Panzer Corps 2, was the system that they have for random number generation in combat, RNGs. It's the one aspect of many games that drives people absolutely nuts. And there's not very many good ways. It can destroy games. Like, it can destroy the enjoyment of games. People get so pissed off. It's the one thing that a lot of gamers will actually rage quit over. Will be poor random number generation during combat. And one thing that Panzer Corps 2 does to sort of get around that problem is to actually have a slider of having sort of like calculated, where you can actually know exactly what the hit or miss will be. Like in Gladius, for example, Gladius there's no randomness in the combat in Gladius, up to full, not full random where it's just wild numbers, but up to the full sort of scope of random numbers within whatever the weapon and the armor is that it's trying to penetrate. And so you've got a full gamut, and by default it's 50-50, which means that it's not going to be dramatically, one way or the other. And I really like it. I really like that they've given the player agency to actually be able to tweak that to what they want. So you can play it very much like a game of chess on one end, and you can play it sort of like much more random on the other end if you don't mind RNG shenanigans. But it's one of the things that do piss me off. So I really appreciated that they put that into the game. So for me, that was a little thing like that makes such a difference. And I think of so many games that would benefit from that same mechanic. And so there's a lot of things like that in the game that it's an awesome game, Panzer Corps 2. So anyway, that came out in March of 2020. There we are. What are we up to next? Combat Mission Shock Force 2. We're now getting to the more modern era of combat mission. At this stage, I think that, I don't know if at this point Slitherine is actually now, sort of doing the marketing for it. Slitherine was the company that took it to Steam. I'll just double check. No, it's actually in 2023. But so this is still being not part of Slitherine stable at this point in time. But anyway, this is when this one came out, Shock Force 2, and then Black Sea as well. You can see in 2021 in January. The big one of the big ones. There's two big ones actually coming up. We've got Shadow Empire, which is, so actually a lot now comes in this little area of 2020, 2021. There's a lot of great games that sort of end up being a part of the stable, the Slitherine stable. Shadow Empire, of course, no exception, and we see this screen there. So this, again, we've sort of spoken a lot about the progression from People's Tactics through to Advanced Tactics Gold, into Decisive Campaigns, and now finally getting to Shadow Empire, which is still being developed. So it's 5 years now that the game has been out, but there's always improvements, and there's DLC going to be coming up as well. So I can't wait. There's a lot of things coming for Shadow Empire, which are really exciting. This game is just getting better and better and better all the time. So it's sort of one of those things where I just can't wait for the improvements that are going to be coming with the game. There's like a what's it called, a roadmap of the plan of attack. Though I guess the one thing that if I'm trying to think of something negative to say about the game, because it's very hard to think of negatives with the game, the one thing I did find a negative is that they did release like an oceanic sort of version of the game. I wish they had a hold on to that and not actually released it until they had really fleshed out how naval units would work, because that doesn't have naval units. It's got like an abstracted way of actually having being able to move across the seas, and I just feel that that misses something. So if I'm looking for a negative, that's the negative. But it's one of my top 5 games of all time. Absolutely love it. So it's just a brilliant game. There's so much to like about this, about Shadow Empire. It's incredible, just the scope of the randomization. There's only 2 games I can think of that are in the same category as Shadow Empire, including Shadow Empire. The other game that has is in-depth map creation based on sort of real world things is Dwarf Fortress, and that's lofty company to be in. And but this one does it more from a planetary scale, whereas Dwarf Fortress does it more from a continental sort of type scale. But in this, it's just phenomenal what actually happens with Shadow Empire. As I said before, one of my favourite games of all time. Absolutely love it. All right, then we've got Stirring Abyss. I didn't play much of that. ICBM came out also in 2020. So we've now got ICBM Escalation, but ICBM did come out. And that's actually, that people like that game a lot. Like this one rates very, very highly. Stirring Abyss also actually rated very highly at that point in time. Combat Mission Black Sea. Another big one, Field of Glory 2 Medieval. So with Field of Glory 2 Medieval, the combat mechanics actually do now change a little bit because of the knights. And it was a good move for them not to just cobble on another DLC onto the Ancients and sort of essentially do another reset and sort of start from here. And then bringing out other DLCs for, sort of expanding the time period and also expanding the areas of the world where the different sort of units are coming from. So I really do enjoy this actual, this version of the game a lot. This is certainly sort of where, this is my favourite of the tabletop games, where they've sort of come from the Field of Glory style of things. Very, very well done. So anyway, that's Field of Glory 2 Medieval. Then we go across. We've got just move this one over. We're getting close to the end actually, which is good. It's a long video, but there's an awful 25 years, and there's a lot of actually what they've done in 25 years is just phenomenal. Valor and Victory came out as well. I won't sort of show that one, but that's actually a combat game, like a World War II combat game with fairly simple mechanics, fairly clean way that one sort of does work. Now we've got another big one, actually, and I want to talk about this one as well, because this is a game that I think is, it's going to be around for a while, and it's just getting better and better as well over time. Warhammer 40,000 Battle Sector. This is a very, very pure style of war game, the way it's sort of the way that the combat mechanics actually sort of do work. There is RNG involved, but you don't really notice it that much in the game. So again, it's fairly well balanced the way it does work. Although sometimes if you've got something that you absolutely need to hit and it doesn't, that's actually can be quite dramatic. But this is actually a game that when it first came out, the actual mechanics has always been very, very good. It only had 2 factions when it first, so the base game has only got sort of like the Tyranids and the Space Marines. So they're the only 2 factions that we've actually got in the game at the start. But there are other DLCs which have added a lot of really, really cool factions to the game as well. So it's sort of one of these games that has actually grown and developed over time, but it sort of does require the DLCs to sort of really make a go of it. I'm sort of hopeful at some point that they'll actually do they combine them all together and just basically have like a stock standard battle sector, because I think it makes a big difference with the way it does work. Now this was actually designed or developed by Black Labs Games, who had actually done Battlestar Galactica Deadlock. And it's sort of funny because when this one came out, I knew that they did a great job graphically. I knew they did a great job with game mechanics, but it was actually I was more worried about the voice acting and the scripting. Again because of Deadlock, but like the voice acting and scripting in this is awesome. Like the sound is incredible. It's just a beautiful experience to play. It's very, very immersive the way it does work. It's got some really nice features in the game, so it's a great game. This is a game that actually Slitherine has now taken over the future development of the game themselves, so they're actually sort of developing. I'm not sure how that's structured and how that one actually works, but that's the process sort of moving forward with the game. And one of the changes with that has been, well, again, I guess we look at Deadlock. One of the problems with Deadlock was a pretty crappy campaign mode. And this game also, when it launched, had a pretty crappy campaign mode. Like it had a series of battles that you could then sort of follow through linearly, but there was no sort of random maps. There was no... The random maps are still problematic for me in the game. Like I'm sort of wanting more, but they're getting better and better the way that they're approaching the different styles of combat in the game as well, the different objectives that each actual map actually has. So I really quite like what they've done with that, and it's improving all the time. It's a good, very, very good game, getting better and better and better. At some point, I think it will overtake Gladius as being, like in my mind, as being the better of the Warhammer 40,000 games, but it's still, like for me, Gladius is still out in front, but this one is closing the gap. And the different campaign modes that they've now brought in, there's got a planetary supremacy mode, which is like a map where 3 factions play. It's a little bit too contrived for me. It does have random components to it, but it's getting better and better, but it's just not there. I wish that there was more detail in the actual map generation, and wish you could play with more factions than what they actually have. So I would love to see that fleshed out more. But I felt that planetary supremacy was never... when they first came out, there was a lot of problems with that. And then they've now brought out a new campaign mode called Conquest Mode. I think it's called Conquest Mode. I may be getting that confused with another game, because I know that there's a Conquest Mode coming for Terminator as well. But I think it's Conquest for this one as well, where it's a short series of linear maps that you then play through, where there's a progression as you go through the actual maps, and there's a theme to the actual overall small approach on different planets. And I really like it. Like it's very simple the way it's actually been done. So it's not a full-blown campaign with overall maps and different factions. You are playing one faction as you progress through, but it works very, very well in the game. Like it works well within the systems that they've actually established for leveling up your faction, and so it's actually extremely enjoyable. I'm finding that is I'm really I'm very, very pleasantly surprised with that new mode, which is still in development. Like it's actually just there's at the moment at time of recording, it's not actually like you can't play with any sort of difficulty. But it's just got a really nice feel about it, and I love where that's heading. I love that the actual random maps that they have, as I said before, are not just having like an elimination style approach to them. They've got like a few different modes. A few more modes would actually really, really make that really quite interesting. It sort of means that with your force, with elimination mode, you essentially can find a way to just turtle up and defend, and then basically sort of try to wipe out forces as they come close to you. And I enjoy playing that way, but it sort of gets a bit boring. Whereas with the way that they've got it now, you do actually have to have forces that can still fight effectively, but also need to be able to rush around the map to get different objectives, which again is much more enjoyable. So they've done a great job of this, and this is a game that's just going to get better and better and better. Anyway, I'm talking too long about that one there. Right, so we are getting sort of now, that's Warhammer 40,000 battle sector. We've then got the combat mission. This is in November of 2021, is combat mission Cold War. And then we have the big one again, Gary Grigsby's War in the East 2. We sort of showed War in the East, with the screenshots. This is sort of like the next iteration of that. And again, there are some maps that play fairly easily, I guess. Like in that sort of sense, like as in they're more constrained. They're sort of the scenarios aren't as large, but it's still an incredibly detailed game. Like it's a phenomenal game to look at. It's very, very niche. So if you're into it, you'll of course know about that particular game. All right, now one of my top favourite games yet again. We've got a few of them all in one big bunch, haven't we? All through here. So on the 10th of March 2022 was the release of Distant Worlds 2. And again, one of my all-time favourites, Distant Worlds 2. What a great, great, great game this is, and what a great franchise it's sort of come from. And this is a game, when it did launch, there were problems with the game at launch, and I think that it's now sort of been acknowledged that really it should have launched into early access and then gone into a full launch, maybe a year later or something. But it's extremely playable. I get a lot of people, because I stream this game a lot, and I get a lot of people actually commenting when I do stream it about, is it worth playing yet? For me, it's always been worth playing because I've always enjoyed it. I never had any of the problems that people had with it, but I've always enjoyed it. But the game has kept on improving and improving and improving all the time. Like there's every update brings some very unique features to the game, the way it sort of is played, and there's a lot more exciting things on the horizon for Distant Worlds 2. So if you had got the game in the early days and walked away from it for whatever reason, play it again now, because I think you'll be very, very pleasantly surprised, no matter what your experience with the game was. It's a game that for me is exudes polish. It's a game also, I think, when I stream, because I do stream this an awful lot, the biggest question I actually have from people is, what does it compare to? How does it sort of then go and work? The thing you've got to put your mind into this one is that it's a simulation game at its core. That's the important thing. It's beautifully unbalanced, so you end up with these sort of like these space opera type things that actually happen into it that can be wildly different. So the experience you have can be very, very different depending on what planets are around you, who your neighbours are, things like that. So it's sort of not as wildly weird as Distant Worlds Universe was. Like that, you can end up with some really unusual sort of ways of working with that game. This game is a little bit more constrained than the original, but it's still really has some interesting storylines that sort of that do come up in the actual game itself. And because it's a simulation game, you really have to sort of not so much plan ahead, but you've got to let things happen. So it's not actually a fast-paced game. And I think that's also what people assume, is that it's because it's just so deep, like there's so much in it, that it's like a click fest, because it's real time as well. But it's got a tactical pause or an active pause, so you can sort of pause and do things. But the game really is designed to be played with automation at a very, very high level. So you can play the game where you actually don't do anything. It's just like watching an aquarium or a fish tank, like with fish doing their thing. You can play it that way if you're wanting to, or you can just start to unlock different aspects. The actual automation in this game is, again, I've never seen a game like it, to be honest, just with the degree of automation that it actually does have, and how much control you as the player has over the bits that you want. So, for example, I'd play on the default when I start a new game. I always just click on default, and then I go down to where the fleets are, because I like to design my ships, and I like to be managing my own fleet. So I turn the fleet management, there's about 5 settings in there. I just turn them to manual, and that's it. That's my settings. That's actually how I start the game. As things come in and start to annoy me with their suggestions, because a lot of the default things are suggestions that it then says, hey, do you want to build these ships, or do you want to give this particular group some money? At that point, I might come in and change the automation of what something that's annoying me will then go and do, either to fully automate it or to turn it off completely. So it's just sort of the way that I play it. But I really enjoy this game a lot. Again, one of my top 5 games. You'll see that there's a lot of Slitherine games in that category. So it's sort of, I've been very blessed to, actually be able to play these games that they've got. It's just incredible with what they actually go and do. Anyway, I'm wasting way too much time. Let's keep on going, moving forward. Another big game, actually. Starship Troopers Terran Command. This is a game that, by all rights, I shouldn't enjoy. But I actually do enjoy it. I don't love it, and I don't love it for one reason, and that basically is that it doesn't have a tactical pause. There's no way when you're playing the game to pause the game, and I find that too much. Like I don't have the reflexes to be clicking around all over a map trying to sort of micromanage every little detail without actually being able to pause and then sort of do the details. So I really hope at some point they relent on that. That's a design decision in the game to actually not do that. But I do hope that they change that aspect, because for me it actually sort of it diminishes my enjoyment of the game. And I know that, look, it's not designed to be to be played perfectly. I think the design decision in the game is to not have that happen. But I'm always of the opinion that decision should be the player's decision, not the developer's decision. You could certainly have by default have it turned off, and then actually have something where you can turn it on as a player if that's the way you want to play it. Because I'm definitely in that category of players who want to play it. It annoys me so much with games that do that, because there's a lot of games that purposely don't put it in because the developer has got like a design mode for how he wants players to play the game. And I can understand why they take that stance, but I always think that the player should be able to play any game the way that they want to play it. And if it means sort of like save scumming or cheating or whatever it might be, so be it. Like it's sort of one of those things. I think that I personally learned, like, this game doesn't sort of have save scumming, or I guess you could if you wanted to, but some games sort of do actually have like a save scum ability to make it quite easy to save scum. I appreciate that when they put that in, because it's a really fast way to learn how to play games, is to save scum. Anyway, this is not a save scum, really a save scum friendly game. It's also not a pause friendly game. But it's, having said that, it's still you can still work your way through it and do what you have to do. So I enjoy it. Don't love it because of that lack of a tactical pause. But anyway, that's hopefully one day they will wake up and think, it would be pretty cool to have a tactical pause in this game after all. And if that's it, if they did that, this would be an incredible game. It's already great the way it works. It's sort of funny, like when these games come out that are essentially franchises of movies or TV shows, whatever they might be. There's always a concern that it's going to be pretty, not that great. There's one coming up, actually. I can sort of see it on the peripheral horizon coming up in a year's time from when we start with Starship Troopers. That for me does fall into that category of just, it didn't work because of the. I'm guessing because of the people that, too many cooks in the kitchen. It's a feel that I get. You don't get that with Starship Troopers. It actually really plays nicely. It really follows the lore of the movie, from what I understand, the book as well. It's just an incredibly well done game, and so if you like that, the whole approach with with what Starship Troopers was all about, this game is definitely worth putting on your horizon and putting on your wish list and just having a bit of a look at it, because as I said before, there's a lot of changes happening within the game. There's a lot of things coming in the game as well. They're developing different modes of play, which is really quite exciting. So it's certainly developing in a very, very nice way. So this is actually, I think, I would call this one of the flagship games of Slitherine. For me, it's a good game, not a great game, because of the lack of tactical pause. So one day, maybe it will be a great game if they put tactical pause in. But that's the one. And I know a lot of you that watch my channel actually feel exactly the same about tactical pause, like a hell of a lot of you. It's because of the comments I get. I get very, very few comments that will say the opposite. So it is a thing. It is a thing. Where hopefully the devs will take it on board at some point. All right, we've got Strategic Command Civil War. Then we've got Master of Magic. I'll talk briefly about this. This one actually deserves its own video, to be honest, to go through the history of what actually happened here. So the original Master of Magic came out in 1994, and it was, it's one of the most influential games that ever made. So many games have stemmed from Master of Magic, the original Master of Magic. And so Slitherine somehow, and I haven't really got to the heart of how they managed to do it, but they managed to somehow get the IP for the original Master of Magic. And that's not an easy thing. There's been a lot of companies over the years, and I don't want to spend too much time talking about this because it's interesting anyway on its own right, but it takes too long to go through all the detail. But essentially, it was sort of the IP got buried. Like I think Atari took it over at one point and then buried the IP. And basically, no one could actually do anything with it, but they were also fairly militant about who could actually then use anything at all that was at all like Master of Magic, the original Master of Magic. And so there was a lot of different game companies that came up trying to actually build a new Master of Magic, and so some of them would say that it's the successor to Master of Magic. Others would sort of say that it's based on Master of Magic, but they'd be crushed each time. And there were even companies that thought they had then secured the IP and they hadn't. And then finally Slitherine actually got it. And so somehow they've ended up with the IP for Master of Magic, which is just awesome. Like it's a great, great game. And so it was then went into development. They used Muha Games, which is a really, really cool development company that sort of works a lot with these sorts of games, which is very, very nice. And so anyway, Master of Magic was then rebuilt to. They tweaked a few things from the original. Like they've of course made it look much more modern the way it sort of does work, and so it plays very similarly to the original. And there's a lot of players. Sorry, I've got people making noise outside. Hopefully that will stop. But it makes what they've actually got is they've got a lot of. Sorry, my mind's gone blank. Yeah. So anyway, there was two definite schools of camp. Two different schools of thought about the game. One camp was to basically make it as close to the original as possible, which is sort of what they achieved to a degree. But people who are in that camp will still say no, they didn't go far enough. And then there's the other school where there was actually like a modder had actually made this incredible mod over literally decades, which is still sort of going. And so Slitherine actually sort of helped with that mod development for the original game, but there was a thought that a lot of the changes that he had introduced into his mods would be great in the modern version. And I sort of am probably more in that camp, to be honest, if thinking about what the changes actually were. So we ended up with a game that I thought was actually very good. Like it was actually a lot of fun to play. It's a bit rough around some of the edges. Like there's some little things that didn't quite work as well as I would have wanted them to, and so this one again I think has sort of now stopped development. But for me, it's not quite finished yet. There's just a bit of polish that needs to be put onto it. But I don't know how or if that will actually ever come. But I'm hoping at some point it does, because I think there's a lot to like about this game, and I do hope at some point they then go and actually make a Master of Magic 2. Like this is technically Master of Magic 2, but if they make a Master of Magic 2 built on top of what this one has done, using a lot of the innovations that have come through the modding over those decades of changes, and sort of build something again up from there. So I think there's an opportunity there for Slitherine to sort of do something, but I think this is on the back burner at this stage. But I do feel that there's a little bit of polish missing from the actual development of the game that just needs a bit of addressing. It's just a few little UX things, user experience things that could be improved in the actual game itself. But overall, I really do like this game a lot, and I would love to see more of what it actually then goes and does. All right, we're getting close to the end here, guys. We're now into 2023. Now, this is actually where the 2023 is where Slitherine and Battlefront games, I didn't actually put that in here, but that's actually where they combine together. And so we end up with the combat mission games now starting to be published through Slitherine, and also then marketed across in the Steam library. So that's actually where so there was a lot of changes, and this is also where I think that the Slitherine then became involved in the development as well. So that's a very, very, very nice handshaking of the companies to sort of get something happening there. I'm looking forward to see what else they bring out in the future, just with working with the two companies there. Right, so Master of Magic, we've done Nuclear War Simulator. I played this one, it was interesting, but again, it was sort of a bit too realistic for my liking. Flashpoint campaigns, again, I didn't really ever play these, but it's sort of, people have suggested I would like it if I did, but I just don't have time. I haven't had time at this point in time. Rule the Waves 3, actually, let's talk a little bit about this one. This one is an interesting game. Yeah, so Rule the Waves 3 is the epitome of a spreadsheet game. It really is. Well, it's not really. A lot of what you do is sort of like working within spreadsheets. It feels like you're sort of playing with an old version of Excel, like, from Windows 1995. The overall feel of it feels old, but the game itself is incredibly good. Where you're actually playing as one of the nations in different sort of eras through from the dreadnoughts or the pre-dreadnoughts up to the 1970s, essentially, with cruise missile ships and things like this. So there's a lot to like about what the game actually does bring. And even within the game itself, there is actually like a mode to sort of then see much more graphically the actual combat, and I quite like it. I really quite like this game a lot, actually, with what it does bring. It's very technical in the way it sort of approaches things, but it's sort of, there's helpers all the way through it to sort of help you design ships or to do whatever you have to do. It's a bit of a management game. You actually play as like the First Lord of the Admiralty in whichever country you're playing as, and you've got to work within the politics of your own country, and you can sort of shape politics a little bit with your decisions or what you suggest, but ultimately it'll be the politicians that make their decisions about wars and so on and so forth. But it's a really cool game. So anyway, that's Rule the Waves 3. Certainly if you're into, don't be put off by this, by the way. I put this one up just to show you the spreadsheet aspect, which is probably the worst thing I could have done. There we are. That's better. There is a dark mode for the game as well, by the way, because people were complaining that it was just all too light and Windows 95-ish. But anyway, this is sort of like where the actual combat then takes place. It's very, very detailed in its modelling, the way it sort of does work. It looks sort of old-fashioned, but there's a lot of stuff going on, even in this sort of graphic that we're seeing now. So if you're interested in naval warfare, certainly have a look at it. It covers like a broad area of very interesting development throughout navies of that era. Enjoyable game to play. It's really, really quite cool. Right, let's move across. Actually, this is now the end of our timeline. Did I miss anything? I don't think I have. I think I've got everything pretty much under here, which we sort of need to talk about. So then we get to Stargate Timekeepers. Okay, so this was the game I was referring to where it just, for me, just doesn't work. And so I haven't really played much of this game. It's sort of, I think if you, it's in the Commando style, like where you've got like a squad that you've then got to move around. They've got different abilities. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's just because I didn't really watch much of Stargate, so I'm not really enamored with the the actual lore of Stargate. So I don't know much about it, to be honest. I mean, I watched it a bit, but not. I wasn't didn't watch it religiously, and I know that a lot of people do. So maybe if you did, this one might be a game that you'd like. But for me, it just didn't really feel as polished as it probably could have been, and also I felt that it's. From a Commando style game, like where you actually are using squads to then go and do things. I did watch some gameplay, like from some of the other streamers and things, but it just, I don't know, just didn't grab me, just from me personally. And it felt like there was too many cooks in the kitchen for this one. Maybe wrong, but that's just my feel. Anyway, so I'm giving you the ugly as well, like my negatives thoughts about games as well as my positives. So I thought, look, I'll just lay it all out there. You can see there's heaps more positives than negatives with it, what I'm actually talking about, because I really do love what Slitherine does. Now this is Terminator Dark Fate Defiance, by the way. This is a game that I really didn't think I was going to enjoy, for the same sort of reasons again, where I thought that there was going to be, because it's based on a franchise, because it's based sort of like around the style of movies, there's going to be way too many constraints on getting a good game out of it. I tend not to like games that are based on movies. I find very, very few I find that I enjoy, but I really love this one. Like this is one of these games that again is just getting better and better. They're bringing out an actual conquest mode for this game as well, which is going to allow us not random maps as such, but it's going to give much more agency and choice to the player to be able to then manipulate where they go in the campaign and sort of handle things in a much more sort of procedural way, which I think is fantastic. So I'm really looking forward to how that one comes together. I'm thinking that's going to take a fair bit of development, but it looks exciting with where that's actually heading. So that's going to be releasing at, again, time of recording, we're talking months away. So not years, and it looks great. The game itself is just beautiful, the way it sort of works, and it's very, very, like it's got tactical pause, so you can sort of pause, make your decisions, move around. It can be fairly difficult, this game as well. Like if you don't position your forces in the right spot for an attack, you will notice it and you will actually you'll get squashed. So it's one of these games that is it's very, very cool tactically. It's a very, very cool tactical game. The story is also really quite good as well. Like just playing when you start to play through these story missions, they're quite involved. So, yeah, but I am really looking forward to the conquest mission. That's sort of more my style. But overall, I really like and so pleasantly surprised what this game actually does bring. It just plays incredibly well. I've really got to play this game more often. It's sort of funny because when it first came out, I had my settings on my computer with streaming was not set as optimally as they could have been, and so I could play it and enjoy it, but I wasn't recording it very well. And I've since fixed all that. So whenever I do stream it now, it does actually show up properly in all its glory because it's a beautiful game. And again, just everything. It's just very hard to find fault in what this game actually does. But again, it's got tactical pause, so important for gamers like me who enjoy taking their time, thinking things through and planning. So anyway, that's a great game. Terminator: Dark Fate Defiance. Next on our list is Headquarters World War II. This is another game that is improving a lot over time, just getting better and better, particularly like the random battles and things are sort of becoming more interesting. I really liked what this game does as well because it's sort of like an entry-level war game. Again, fairly simple mechanics, the way it actually does play. It looks great, the way it sort of has everything sort of going. I tend to play the random maps more than the actual missions in the game. And I've got to say that at this point in time, that does need some work. There's ways of sort of cheesing the game, and it's very hard not to be tempted to get too many artillery because the artillery is really the way that you can essentially wipe out the map from long distance. So it's an easy way to sort of play at the moment and play out your sort of random map fantasies in this particular game. But it's a very cool game. That's one thing that I think needs to be improved. The other thing I think needs to be improved in this game is that the Germans need to have German voices, not British voices. That's actually fairly big. Actually, it lacks all immersion when you play as the German forces in this game. But overall, it's a very, very good game. Just needs a few little tweaks, and I think it would go even higher up in that greatness rating. But it's a very enjoyable game to play. But as I said before, if you're playing random maps and if you get 3 long range artillery, you've basically won the game. So that's unfortunately. I wish that there was ways of limiting the way that those sorts of things were then bought. So there needs to be more balance in those random maps. And so I know that they've been working on things a little bit with those, but there needs a lot more work just to sort of really get those balanced out. But overall, very, very cool what they're sort of doing with this game. So keep on looking at Headquarters World War II. Again, I do recommend this game. I like it a lot. It just could be a little bit better. So Field of Glory Kingdoms. This is the the one that sort of then works back in with Field of Glory 2, with the medieval battles, medieval sort of aspects. I find it easier to play than Field of Glory Empires, the ancient version. But this is still like a grand strategy game. It still actually has the same sort of aspects of a simplified combat auto battler system within the game that you can then export the battles out and play them in Field of Glory 2 Medieval if you're wanting to play it that way. But they've actually changed a lot of the underlying game mechanics, which are a little bit confusing in Field of Glory Empires, simplified them a little bit, and have also added in or changed a few of the other ones around to make it sort of more applicable for the medieval times. And again, a great game. I hope that they're going to keep on adding more and more content to it. I would love to see sort of like a grand campaign that sort of starts off maybe 200 years after the current campaign. It's sort of like at the moment, the current campaign starts off in 1054. That's the actual main campaign, the big one that we sort of see on the map at the moment. And so we really are looking at the end of the Viking era. So we're looking at sort of Huskarls, and we're not looking at knights in shining armour at that stage. We do actually have like spearmen on horseback and things like that, but it's not really those high Middle Ages that you think about. There's not really the longbows either. So again, I'm going to harp on again about all my longbows in Field of Glory. There are certainly scenarios that actually do take you to that era, but I would love to see a grand campaign of that era. That I reckon would be awesome. I think that what makes that hard though is because some of the countries by that stage were just so big and developed, and whereas in 1054 there's a lot of petty kingdoms around. A lot of the countries hadn't really been formed at that stage, so it makes sense to have 1054. But I do like having those higher units to play with in the game. But it's a very, very cool game the way it does actually work with everything that's actually in it as well. Like it's very, very, very well thought out. Again, as you sort of expect from the Agiod development team with what they end up doing. It's brilliant, brilliant game. So love that one. I love it. Let's have a look at a few of the others. So we've now got next we've got Strategic Command War in the Pacific. Again, this is sort of like fairly like it's detailed with what it does do. It's one of these games where it starts off historical, and then you sort of your choices then can have like very, very broad impact on the course of the war, and it's entry level as well. So it's nice and simple, nice and quick to actually go and play the Strategic Command games. Next one we have is Scramble Battle of Britain. I've got to say unequivocally, this is the best flight simulator type combat game that I've ever played, and it's not really a flight simulator where you're sort of playing with a joystick or anything like that. So it's not realistic like in that sort of sense. But you can sort of see with the ribbons even in the screen that's sort of showing the screenshot that's showing there. It certainly has like it's all about planning your moves. It's based on the real planes. Like there's a lot of realism in the way that you then have to fly the planes. It does have a multiplayer mode as well, but it's a WeGo system yet again, very much like Battlestar Galactica Deadlock. So that's Battle. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we've got the right name. God, there's a lot of games, isn't there? There's so many games that you don't realise just how many games Slitherine has actually put through their stable. It's just incredible. Anyway, this Scramble, if you haven't seen it, have a look at it, because this is a game where you plan your moves. It's a WeGo system again, like it's about 10 seconds for each turn, and so you're dogfighting with different planes, and they keep on adding more and more planes. It's in early access at the moment. There's going to be a campaign mode that will come, and there's a lot of questions about what will come in that campaign mode. I actually don't know the answers to any of those questions. So like there's questions about like, will you be able to play from the German side or the British side? Will you be able to play over land, not just sea? Things like that. So I'm not sure what the answers are to those. I hope that the answer is yes to both of those, but I don't know. Having said that, the game itself is just so enjoyable to play. Like it's actually very, very cool the way it does work. They're adding more bombers and things for you to then go and attack with your Hurricanes or Spitfires. So it's just a lot to like about what they're actually adding to the game. And and as I said before, like it's got a great, great system for actual aerial combat. It's very, very well done, and like it's still got a long way to go in its development, but certainly very enjoyable just where it currently is. Wow, only 2 games left to go in this presentation. We've got Armoured Brigade 2. So this is actually the next version of Armoured Brigade. And this is the one with the 3D aspect. So the maps have sort of been changed into like 3D maps. And it makes a difference. Like it's surprising. Like I didn't think it would when I was playing the game, because I sort of got used to playing it looking down all the time. And I didn't realise just how helpful it is to be able to visualize the battlefield from a 3D perspective rather than just using the tools that are provided in the game. Those tools are still there, the line of sight tools and things, and they can still be useful for planning things, but the overall 3D aspect of the game is really a game changer in what it does do. Other things that is cool about this one again is like with it being fully 3D and stuff, we've got the 3D units that sort of roll around the battlefield. It's a difficult game. But it's really cool to play it. You've got to really think it through. And as I think I said before, that the way that you build your dynamic campaigns is on real maps of the 1980s, because this is a Cold War game, and so you sort of set up your maps dynamically across these massive maps, and then sort of you can see in this particular screenshot, like there's a whole group of units that have to get across a bridge to get across the river, and that would be a real world location. Like I said, that's from the 1980s. It's actually on a real map. Great game. So anyway, that's a really cool one. And we've got one left. Probably, I reckon it's going to be probably the biggest game that Slytherin's actually got in their stable, actually, just with the reception it's received. And of course, I'm talking about the big one, Broken Arrow, which really has sort of hit the internet by storm, and also got a whole other audience that is sort of playing this game. And it's not your typical war game audience, like it's sort of like a real-time strategy type game, but it does have tactical pause again. There we go, another one of these great games, a tactical pause, and I really enjoy playing this one single player. Look, the game has only just come out, and so there's a few little bugs that need to be ironed out, which they will be ironing them out. So, at time of recording, there's for people who play single player, there's certainly a few little nice to haves that need to be in the actual game. But overall, this is phenomenal. I've been finding that since I've actually had the game, it's become one of my go-tos just to spend some time. If I've got an hour or two to kill, this is the game I'm sort of been gravitating towards over the recent weeks, just to sort of play it in single player. I'm not really a multiplayer player of these sorts of games, so I'll probably never ever play this one as a multiplayer game, but I've got to love it as a single player game. As I said before, it's just going to get better and better as they start to add in more componentry to it, but it's a beautiful looking game. The overall approach of how you actually sort of build your combat decks to sort of then deck out your forces is very, very well done. There's been questions from people asking, are they going to add more forces to the game? I don't know. I sort of hope so. I've been thinking about that. Like at the moment, you've only got sort of like it's Modern Warfare 2, by the way. So the forces are as if it's from now. And so you've got like, F-35s, things like that are sort of flying around with modern equipment as well. But you've got like American and Russia forces. I think it'd be cool to sort of see NATO forces added, maybe sort of Chinese forces, things like that. I think it would be pretty cool to sort of see in the game. I think that could work, like if they are looking for expansions, but I think that they've still got a bit of work to do on the base game just to sort of really, really get it thumping along. But the user experience of playing this game is it's one of these games that there's very few games that you sort of, after you've been playing, you think, God, that was so smooth, like the way that you actually play the game. And this is one of them because the UX is so well done. And really, there's a lot that other games could actually learn from this. And I can think of only a handful of games that actually really have done that well, and this is one of them. I've tried other games of the same genre, and it doesn't have that same degree of polish, just in the UX aspect, the user experience aspect. But this game does have it. So, I'm thinking that this is going to be an absolutely enormous game moving forward. So, anyway, that sort of brings our list of games to an end. So, again, what an incredible 25 years. I've just, putting this together, like putting all of these timelines together for the actual of what Slitherine has done, way, way, way back. It doesn't even fit on my timeline program here, to fit it in properly. But there we go, from way back in the year 2000, and just I loved looking at these buttons at the bottom here, just sort of seeing the red dots, spread out as they're developing. Three of them working in an office in Epsom, in England. Epsom or Epsom, I'm not sure how you pronounce it, but anyway, sort of working away, getting Legion out a couple of years later, and then a year or two after that, you're getting a few more, and then a few more. You start to sort of get more and more involved, and you're starting to sort of, getting more and more into the actual publishing side of things. Lots and lots of stuff sort of happening where you're getting lots of things now sort of coming in together. Putting it in this sort of timeline perspective is really, really interesting, just to see the growth of this incredible company. And as I said before, as a gamer, I just love that they've actually been so successful, because it means that we've had just such a plethora of great games to play over 25 years essentially of what they've been doing. So keep up the great work, Slitherine. I'm a fan for life, I'm thinking, because I was from when I first joined your forums back in 2005 or 2006, and that was based on the Legion games that I was playing, and also I think just the other things you had in the forum always interested me. So great work. So congratulations on if you are watching from Slitherine, congratulations on reaching 25 years. It's a massive achievement in its own right, and but also just looking at this library of games that you've actually curated or helped to curate and bring out to a niche public is exceptional. So thank you for all that you have done. I'll leave it there, guys. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe if you like this sort of content, and please comment as well. Like, what are the games that you like? What's a game you like? What's a game you hate? What's a game you're disappointed in? I've sort of gone through that in this presentation. I've got a lot that I love, a hell of a lot that I love, a lot that I like. I've got a couple that I don't like, and I've got one that I'm disappointed in. So it's had it all. It's had it all in this presentation. Anyway, take care. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.